Hi, my name is Karina. I'm a psychologist and a couples and sex therapist, and I want to share a couple of tips from some of my favorite books on how to survive as a couple. So, one of the first tips comes from Jörg Willi, who is a psychiatrist, and he writes about how new families, what some of the dynamics are when you are in a new situation as a new family. And I think it's very relevant right now because he talks about how it takes a lot of time and an enormous conscious effort to adapt to a new situation. So don't be surprised that this is putting a strain on you, and don't be too impatient. It'll take some time to adjust to the new living situation. So another tip comes from John Gottman and Nan Silver's book, 7 Principles on How to Make a Marriage Work. And it's he's considered a bit of a guru within couples therapy. Good stuff in here. But what I want to share with you today is what he writes about knowing each other's love maps, or having a love map about each other, which basically means you know about your partner's fears, your partner's hopes, your partner's dreams. And I'll just read a little bit to you. It's if you don't actually have this deep knowledge of each other, he writes, it's easy for your marriage to lose its way when your lives shift so suddenly and dramatically, as it is maybe right now. So try to see if you can make some time for each other after the kids are put to bed or whatever, to just at least once a week get in touch with each other and talk, sometimes about more superficial stuff, but also try to get into the more personal and deep level of conversation with your partner. My third tip is from this book, Das indiskrete Fragebuch von Ulrich Clement. He has a whole set of questions that you can ask your partner if you don't know what to ask your partner, from tip number 2. And one of the really nice questions here in times like these is to ask yourself, what are you grateful to your partner about that you wouldn't, where you wouldn't have been without your partner? And my extra little sub question to that is, would you tell them? Would you like to share it with them? Tip number 4, Dan Savage. Great book, lots of insights. He has a great podcast. He writes columns. He's just all around awesome. And go on YouTube and type in The Price of Admission. It's not in the book, but you can watch it on YouTube. It's his answer to what you can do when you're having the same arguments again and again, or if there's something about your spouse or your partner that irritates you again and again. The Price of Admission. Check it out. Tip number 5 is from a Danish psychologist called Hanne Hostrup. She wrote this book called Kærestebilleder, which you can't read if you don't know Danish, but she has some really amazing insight, and she has this little analogy of defense mechanisms of people either withdrawing into their tower or trying to get people to come out of the tower by basically bulldozing them. So it's about how we go into extreme positions often. This is what happens a lot in couples, and what couples therapy also is about, is trying to get people out of the extremes. But so consider if maybe you're one of these, or if you don't recognize these pictures at all, what kind of extreme positions do you reckon maybe you got yourself into? If you find yourself saying he or she or they, always this and that, when it's always or never and all of those words, watch out, because you're thinking in extremes and you probably don't see the nuances in your partner anymore. So try to think about that. What are the defense mechanisms that you have? What are the defense mechanisms that the other person has? And how you can go about trying not to be so extreme, but to see the difference, the times when they're not in the extreme position. Like, have they ever not been the way they are? Does that make sense? I hope so. Another tip I want to share with you is from this book, from Christoph Ahlers, Vom Himmel auf Erde und Hölle im Kopf. It's actually about sex, but he has some pretty good insight when it comes to couples dynamics. And what I wanted to share with you today is one of the things that we need when we are in a situation, a crisis situation, with our spouse or our partner, is that we need a calmness, obviously, and also patience, and the awareness that the grass won't grow any quicker if you're pulling at it. So what he talks about is accepting things. It reminds me a little bit of acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, which is also really good. Look into that if you're interested. Lots of good tips there as well. But so he talks about accepting and letting go. And here he talks about something that concerns a penis that won't get hard. That's another story, maybe for another YouTube video. But this sense of just being there and letting it come to you, and the fact that you cannot change things right now is also a way of letting go. I'm not sure where I am. Is this tip number 7? I think so. Anyway, The Velvet Rage. It's not really a book on couples and couples dynamics, not even on sexuality. It is in a way, I guess, because it's about being from a sexual minority. And what I think is really interesting about Alan Downs' book is that he writes a lot about shame and how it is to live in a world where the surroundings just don't recognize you, and where you're not being validated through media and through everything that heterosexuals have. And it's interesting, he has this example from a couple, and that's why I want to share it with you. He because it's something that happens in couples of all sexual orientations, which is basically that one partner said to the other, "I really loved the dinner you cooked tonight. It was amazing." And then the other partner is thinking like, "Oh my God, does that mean he didn't like my other, all the other dinners I made?" And so what Alan Downs here is talking about is that, we have to avoid seeking invalidation, because that's what a lot of people do when they're used to being shamed, when they're used to being criticized, or, things that are worse for having another sexual orientation than the heteronormative society around us. Okay, so tip number 8 comes from another classic. He's a Belgian psychologist. I had the honor of working with him when I first started out as a couples therapist. Love is a doing word, I would translate it into. And he writes, again, lots of goody stuff for couples therapists, but this book is actually written for couples who are lay people, who aren't in therapy. And he talks about something he calls for a vluchtheuvel. And basically what it means is that we all need time to retreat. We all need to have that special room where we can go and just be ourselves. And most of us don't have our own room anymore. If you do, then lucky for you, and hang out, put out a little card, do not disturb or whatever. Tell your partner first though. But so what do you do when you live in a small apartment and you are simply, climbing up the walls? Is to talk to your partner about finding out a place where you can be, where when your partner sees you, they know, okay, my partner doesn't want to be disturbed right now. And it can be, for example, a time of day from 4 to 5, I need my me time, because that's when I just zone out anyway, or whatever it can be. And then, for example, to say or it doesn't have to be a specific time, it can also just be if I'm sitting in, let's say, that chair over there. If I'm sitting in the leather chair, I don't want to be disturbed, I need to be a little bit on my own. So that way you can signal by sitting in a chair, simply being in the same room still, that you don't want to be disturbed right now, that you need to sort of go into your own zone. The 9th tip is from Schulz von Thun, which, if you have been in therapy with me, or if you know me personally, then you will have heard me talk about this, because he writes about the 4 sides of a message. Now, what does that mean? See, he has this little thing, hey you, it's green, it's a green light. And there are 4 ways of understanding this message. There's an informative side, there's the plea. The plea is gib gas, which basically means hit it, because the light is green. You need me to tell you that the light is green. That's relational. And over here is self-revelation. I'm in a hurry, for example. And up here is the information level, that it's green. And you can put any message in there where you feel like, oh man, we're misunderstanding each other now. So in my own relationship, I'll sometimes ask my partner something, and then say, that was an information question, just to already make sure there are no, was that a hidden message? Does that mean she wants tea or what? So clear communication is really, really, really important. But what is communication? It can really also very quickly go wrong. So Schulz von Thünemann, he gets a thumb up. Okay, and my last tip is Alain de Botton, The Course of Love. What a great book. What a great guy. Philosopher, I think. He's British. He's brilliant. Check out his YouTube channels. He's the founder of the School of Life. They have lots of awesome stuff, fun stuff, interesting things. And this is really, it's a novel, but still it's somehow very relevant for couples because, as he writes, love is a skill, not an enthusiasm, or not just an enthusiasm, which is, basically that we shouldn't just think like, oh, love is blind and everything is going to be fine. No, like, it's a skill. Like Christoph Ahlers actually writes about this as well in his book, Himmel auf Erde. He talks about how we should lead our relationships. You don't just have a relationship, you should lead a relationship. Beziehungen führen. It's a great concept, because if you're just going to sit down and talk, let's say, then who's going to take the lead? What are you going to talk about? How do you figure out, like, some of the best talks can be where you actually have a topic that you're going to be talking about. So how do you lead a good relationship? What do you need to do that? Okay, here's a little afterthought still. Consider also what it's like being in a relationship with you. If we're cooped up together for the next weeks, who knows, maybe even months, you're gonna start, being really irritated and frustrated with your spouse or your partner, your other important one, your loved one, and think about what it's like to be in a relationship with you instead of just looking at what is wrong with the other person. It can be a bit confronting, but hold that mirror up in front of yourself, and remember that the stuff that you are being irritated by with your spouse or your partner is probably what drew you to them in the first place. Like, whatever it is that we like about our partner in the first time we meet them is actually what's gonna frustrate us or anger us. So put that to work on yourself as well. What do you have that might be irritating, Because that way you might actually also be able to soothe yourself a little bit and be like, oh, okay, I can be irritating too. That was it. I hope the tips can inspire you or help you, or if nothing else, make you laugh. They don't replace therapy, of course. Remember that. So if you are in a crisis situation, seek out online counseling wherever you are. There's lots of us who are available nowadays. And take care of each other and take care of yourself. Bye now.